recording yourself is challenging. As soon as you hit that record button, even if in the back of your head you're like, no, I might never share this, like there's never any need for anyone to ever hear it, something happens that means that playing feels different. Speak to yourself like a friend, not like a critic. Recording really can become a powerful tool that you can survive. You can get through it, and it will be worthwhile. Welcome to the How to Harp podcast, where your harp and your journey are always front and centre. I'm Heather Downey, harpist and founder of How to Harp, your online space for expert guidance and endless inspiration. Each week, we are here to empower, inspire, and encourage you, whether you're just beginning or many years into your harp adventure. From chats with world-class professionals to real stories from everyday harpists to practical tips you can use right away. This podcast is all about helping you feel happy, confident, and fulfilled with your harp. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the How to Harp podcast. And it's a solo episode with me. Today I'm going to give you a tip about practicing, and I'm excited about sharing with you guys today. So we are going to be talking today about recording yourself and living through the experience. Yeah? So the first thing I want to do before we actually jump into the tips I'm going to give you about recording yourself, why might you be recording yourself? So most of us are recording ourselves really at the end of the day for some sort of shared experience or performance. So lots of you guys out there, I know, record yourselves and share yourselves on YouTube, which is so lovely. We obviously at How to Harp do the Christmas collaboration every year, and you have to record yourself as part of that to become part of the big ensemble. And I know every year people come and they're worried about recording themselves, and it's a really big deal. And so often when you are recording yourself, it's to share a performance or to share a kind of finished product, if you like. So what I'm actually going to be talking about today, I'm going to give you 5 tips to incorporate or to begin to incorporate recording into your kind of everyday harping, which will, 1, help your harping and help your learning journey improve, but 2, it will also help you if you do have a goal of, you know, getting to a stage where you feel comfortable recording yourself, or getting into a stage where you can record yourself for kind of full performance and share it on YouTube or share it in a community or take part in the Christmas collaboration, where you feel a little bit more comfortable with that process of recording yourself. Now, the other thing I want to say before I jump into my tips is that recording yourself is challenging. As soon as you hit that record button, even if in the back of your head you're like, no, I might never share this, like there's never any need for anyone to ever hear it, something happens that means that playing feels different. And if you're out there thinking, yeah, I've had like stage fright when I started recording, you're not the only one. And as someone who records herself regularly, and the worst part about it is going back to edit. If you have to edit yourself, wow, that is really hard. But yeah, it's something that for me, I've learned to certainly utilize in my practice. Recording for practice feels different to me now. But recording and talking to camera, like I'm doing right now, still, strangely enough, feels a little bit odd. I've got a whole bunch of other tips about that kind of recording, which we can talk about another day. But yeah, I guess I'm trying to say is don't be too hard on yourself. Recording yourself is difficult, and it's another one of those things that if you're interested in doing, you have to practice it. So here we go. I'm going to give you guys 5 tips. Got a few notes in front of me. So if you see me looking down, I am looking at my notes. I'm going to give you guys 5 tips to incorporating recording into your practice to help you with the goal of sharing your music, or just to help you in your general day-to-day practice, because recording is a great tool to use in practice. So my first tip is don't record everything. To sit down and record a whole practice session can feel really intense. If you've never recorded before and you're sitting down for the first time to record you performing or sharing a piece, that can feel really intense. So kind of like work yourself up, record little sections. Now, this is going to help you whether your goal is to create some sort of finished product of recording, or whether your goal is to use recording as a tool in your practice sessions. Because first of all, if you're looking to record a full finished set, starting by focusing on a couple of bars, a line, one section, takes the intensity out of the session and makes that little section feel like something you can manage. It's not that kind of big leap. It's one little step towards recording. So you could record just 8 bars, you could record just the left hand, just the right hand, one section, a tricky passage, just record the opening or the introduction, or just record you speaking the introduction if that's what you're doing. But it makes recording become part of your practice, and it takes less of that kind of performance anxiety out of it because you're breaking it down into these small things. It stops becoming this big stressful event, and it becomes that little regular thing that you do. On top of that, if you're using recording as part of your practice tools, again, if you sit down and record a whole practice session, even if your practice session is, say, 15 minutes, which is relatively short, if later you want to look back on a piece or an exercise that you did during that practice session, you have to look through 15 minutes of material to find that. If your practice session is an hour, you have to search through an hour's worth of material to find that. Whereas if you are recording little small videos and labeling them as you go along so that you can look back easily, then you can look back easily. You've labeled them, you've got short videos which are clearly showing different sections or different exercises, much easier for you to look back on. And for a practice tool, you can be thinking about listening back and focusing on, is the rhythm steady? Are all the notes correct? Are the harmonics sounding? You can listen for specific things. And small recordings are much more easy to manage and easy to navigate than recording big things. So tip 1, don't record everything, just record small sections. Tip 2, this is a kind of a mindset thing as well, this one. Remember that recording, got a little splinter in my hand there. We've been moving wood in for the fire. Remember that recording is information. It's not judgment. So even if you're using recordings as part of a practice tool for you to look back and self-assess, try and think about it as giving yourself information. So you're not looking back and saying, oh, that just sounds awful, or that's just no good, I didn't get this right. But rather think about the recording not to tell you about whether you're a good or a bad harpist, but it's there to give you information about what you maybe can't hear fully during the actual intensity of the practice session. Because when you're practicing, you are maybe focusing on reading music or remembering music, fingering, pulling your fingers in, bending your thumbs, the rhythm, what comes next. There's so many things to think about. There's very little space for you to listen. You can't hear yourself objectively in that moment. And so the video or the recording is information for you, not judgment, but information. So the recording allows you to step back as a listener, not the player, but as a listener, and, be incredibly valuable information. What do I notice? What's working well? What could I improve on next? So you're not judging, this is good, this is bad. Just looking for information. What's the next thing I could do? Etc, etc. So tip number 2, the recording is for information, not for judgment. Tip number 3, I think this is a big one. Listen for only one thing. This is actually something that I learned from when I did Suzuki teacher training. We were always taught to observe everything in the lesson, but choose one thing to work on. So I think when you're listening back to your recordings, and you're using them as a practice tool, try and listen once and think about rhythm. Listen again and think about the notes. Then you might want to think about the dynamics. Listen again and think about the tone or the phrasing, tension or speed. But listening to one thing at a time when you listen back to your recordings. It's so easy to feel overwhelmed if you try and listen to everything at once, or you allow everything to come at you at once. And honestly, sometimes you can feel a bit down if you're listening to everything at once. So choose one thing and say to yourself, okay, I'm only listening to whether the melody is singing out nice and clear. Then you listen to the recording. Is the melody singing out nice and clear? Oh, in bar 3, I could work a little bit more on that note that's played with the thumb. Information for you to take away. So, tip number 3, listen to just one thing in the recording. Tip number 4, and this one is also, I feel like all of them are important. Oh, I should stop saying this one's really important. This is basically practice. Practice recording yourself. Record regularly so that recording begins to feel normal and begins to feel part of your practice routine. If you are rarely recording, then when you do come to recording, it feels more scary. So it's all about practicing. If you only record when you're preparing for an exam, or when you've got a performance coming up, or if you're only hitting record when you're recording that performance, that's when it can start feeling really, really intense and really scary. Whereas if you're using recording as part of your everyday practice, or maybe you're making it a routine to do some sort of recording every week, it becomes part of your routine. It becomes part of the kind of normal time at the harp. And, you know, just like warming up or tuning your harp, recording, that's part of what I do as well. And the other thing about this is if you record regularly, you start to build up this really interesting kind of portfolio of your work, and you can look back on your progress over time. And that can be such a useful tool, especially when we reach those days where you kind of feel like, oh, I've been working on this for months and I don't feel like it's improved. You can look back on the recordings and you will have improved. And that can be a real pick-me-up and a real encouragement. And that's another thing about the recording being for information. So if you're looking back and you're listening and you're seeing that you've improved, don't make that, oh, I was so terrible back then, how awful. Make that, wow, it's amazing how much I've improved. So remember, this is a positive tool to look back and see how far you've come, not a negative tool to look back and see how bad you were. Okay, the last one. Can you believe I'm going to say the most important of all? So tip number 5, speak to yourself like a friend, not like a critic. Well, this is harder, it's easier said than done. But when you listen back to your recording, think about how a friend would speak to you in the recording, or even a teacher, but not like a critic. A critic might say, that was terrible, that was messy, you always mess that bit up, you're not very good at this. A teacher is going to say, the rhythm was a little uneven there. Let's slow that section down and really pick out that rhythm. Or the phrase was really nice there. How about we keep that shape moving forward? A friend would say, oh, your dynamics were beautiful and interesting there. Can you do the same later on? So you want a voice that's going to help you improve and move forward. So think about the tone when you're speaking to yourself. Think about the way that you speak to yourself. It's really important that you treat yourself well. There's no point in treating yourself bad. And if it helps, imagining that the person you're listening to in the recording isn't you and is someone else, then do that. Do that if it helps. There's nothing wrong with that. So, recording yourself, honestly, it might never be the most comfortable or the most natural thing for you to ever do. I wouldn't say that recording myself has ever become, the highlight of my harp playing, but it's a really, really useful tool, and one that I think is a great thing for us to practice. So if you can remember to record in small sections, that your recording is for information and not for judgment, that you try to listen to one thing at a time when you listen back in your recordings, that you record regularly so it starts to feel more normal to you, and that you speak to yourself like a friend and not as critic, then recording really can become a powerful tool that you can survive. You can get through it and it will be worthwhile. And if you've never recorded yourself before and never explored using it as a practice tool, then maybe this podcast and these tips are that little nudge towards getting you on that journey of trying recording. Just a few bars, doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just press record and see what happens and see if it's useful for you. Who knows what you can learn. Well, as always, thank you so much for listening to our podcast. And if you found the tip useful and you enjoy listening, then please do leave a comment, like, subscribe and share and help us reach more harpists. Now, next week we are in for a real treat. We do have a little space until our next podcast because we are changing our podcast release date to a Tuesday. So we're going to have like a 10-day space. I hope you guys can all last when we move to a Tuesday. So watch out for that change of day. Podcast release is going to be a Tuesday moving forward. But kicking us off, I can think of no one better than the amazing Gwen Clean from Wales. Now, Gwen Clean is someone who I met a few years ago down in Cardiff at the Camac Festival. And when I say met, I saw her perform. Her performance was so good, amazing, beautiful playing. And I went to let her know after her performance, a few hours after her performance, that I was so touched by it and it was just so wonderful. And then I went out and bought some of the repertoire that she'd performed on stage because it was so good. So that was our first meeting. It was very brief. But then I was really delighted when at the Camac Cardiff Festival this year in 2026, we got to know each other properly and spend some proper time together. And Gwen Clean is just so bright, so bubbly, so fun and lovely to spend time with. And her playing and her music is beautiful. So in a little bit longer than a week, you guys can sit down and join me chatting away to her and hearing about her harping life and journey. So looking forward to that, and I'll see you all then.